Did you worry about me when you were away? She told me she found my sweater quite nice. Very nice colors. I cried a little, then a bit more. Dribbling, you know. So love apparently was the last thing to go, and I was apparently the last one there to see the end of it. I watched the little flame as it sputtered and spattered, bent its head and turned into a vague little plume of smoke. Oh, well. So that's how it went. Who would have guessed? I didn't really want to, but I put my hand around Judy's waist and held her next to me. It was a small gesture which could lead to nothing. My dick lay limply inside my trousers, like a little lunch packed by Mother. I decided to untie the rope that served me for a belt, and it turned out there was a fireplace there in the room. We made a fire and sat barefoot in front of it.
Outside, the wind swept the boardwalk of sand. It swept the porch. And inside our little room, I tried to hold him, to console him. It was like holding on to a nervous little piglet. He kept slipping away. Meanwhile, some awful trick of the night or the mind made me remember him as he'd once been. His confidence, the warmth, the directness of his touch.
A burden was lightened now that love was gone. It had always been a difficult word for me.
His skin felt like cold clay. I wanted to bathe him, to play with him, to bring him back to life. But that couldn't happen. Almost all of him was dead.
In my dream, blue smoke was blowing through the room. The barn door creaked, the cows mooed. I lifted off the ground, feeling very dizzy, dropping ashes faster and faster.
The next morning my head felt hot. The old symptoms again. As soon as we got back, I put the last of my cartons into a taxi and finally moved out to the apartment I'd found, out in that very quiet suburb up where Joan lived. The first thing I did there was to buy some white shirts in the local market and a pair of sandals. And almost every day, long before dawn, while it was still pitch dark, I'd get up, dress, walk through the little town's empty streets, then down the highway down to the beach. Darkness, the sea, the lighthouse, the gulls, the sand thick and wet like black ice cream. Did I judge you? Sure I did, of course, but never mind, you'll be forgiven by cooler heads. Probably after death, unfortunately, but that's better than never. The effort people make simply amazes me. Just to get up, get dressed, it's not that easy. To feed oneself, to wash the dishes. I can't believe people do it year after year.
After the night I saw Judy, I lost my job. But I kept up with my habit of wandering through the city, and there was another thing that began to happen, where every time that I thought the word I, it sort of echoed or rang out in my head, and I was troubled by it. The idea of the self was obsessing me now. What were we constantly talking about? The self, the self. What was the self? Well, one cloudy, drizzly late afternoon, I was sitting in my apartment writing in my diary, and unfortunately I'd managed to spill my tea, and my hands were all wet, and so was my diary, and my clean laundry, and a bunch of forks, and the clothes I was wearing, and as I grabbed a rag and started to wipe things up, I suddenly understood it very, very clearly, and the clarity made me queasy, as if a door had opened and bright light and oxygen had flooded into my brain. As the rag sat soaking in the tea on my lap, I understood that myself was just a pile of bric-a-brac, just everything my life had quite by chance piled up. Everything I'd seen or heard or experienced, meticulously, pointlessly piled up and saved. A heap of nothing. A heap of nothing which had somehow been compressed into some sort of a form, and which had somehow succeeded in coming alive, and which quite ridiculously now demanded tribute, declared itself great. And the amazing thing was that I'd gone along with it. We all had. We all had bowed down. We all had worshipped, each one kneeling before his own separate self, each one obsessed by a single question to the exclusion of everything. What will happen to this self which is mine? Will I achieve magnificence and success? Will I be admired? Will my marvelous self express itself? How idiotic! And how boring! How boring, how boring, how boring, how boring. And was this obsession even sincere? I wondered if the show of adoration wasn't perhaps just a bit overplayed. If all the overacting didn't perhaps reveal an element of pretense. And as I thought all these things, I felt I saw, standing by the window in the fading light, that very creature, that self which was mine. That ludicrous figure whom I'd approached till now with such ostentatious displays of respect, such fervor, groveling, hand-kissing, and tears. And I went up to the figure, the unpleasant little self, and I sort of grabbed it by the arm and spun it around toward me. And then I threw it on the ground and kicked it smartly in the face. And then I sat on top of it and grabbed its neck and choked it and strangled it and bashed its skull against the floor until it stopped squealing, stopped howling, gasped, and was gone. And what a fucking relief it was. All the posturing, all the seriousness, the weightiness that I was so sick to death of, I never have to do any of it ever again. I would walk down the streets like a cheerful ghost, and no one would know my secret. It would really be funny. And of course I saw immediately all the implications. I could be anything now, whatever I wanted. If I was a ghost, I could walk through walls. It would be so much easier than knocking on doors and begging someone to let me in.